I strongly believe that freedom of transaction is a basic human right that has been forgotten to declare. In the digital age, freedom of transaction is actually an underlying thing. Governments love the idea of a cashless society because it gives them full surveillance potential. Banks love cashless society because they can take a little percentage of every pack of chewing gum you buy. Cash is not defined by being paper notes and coins. Cash is defined by certain properties. And with Bitcoin, we managed to transfer these properties into a digital realm, into a digital thing. Bitcoin has a bright future when we manage to increase the degree of privacy and anonymity.
Hi George, first of all, nice to have you here today with us.
Thanks for the invitation.
I would like to start our conversation with a statement that some people believe that transparency of financial operations of individuals is a key element of democracy. Others insist that this is severe major violation of privacy, whereas cash is an essential component of an open liberal society. What is your opinion on this matter?
Well, you have a wide range here. I believe activities of governments should be entirely transparent. I believe activities of individuals should be as private as possible. The German hacker scene actually has a slogan, a motto here, which is called private Daten schützen, öffentliche Daten nützen, which means as much as protect private data and use public data. And in Bitcoin, we have a similar concept that is called user-defined privacy, because, as you know, the Bitcoin blockchain is an entirely transparent public ledger, but it's pseudonymous. You only can see from what Bitcoin address to what Bitcoin address money is flowing, and you don't necessarily know who's behind these addresses, which is great, which actually has to be improved even more. As I pointed out in my talk yesterday, we actually need more privacy and anonymity for individuals in Bitcoin. But on the other hand, you have organizations for who it might be really important to be transparent and to show to the public that the public can believe. Imagine you're an organization funded by donations. You're some kind of non-profit, so people want to know how much money did you get and how much did you spend. So in this case, the blockchain actually offers the perfect tool to offer transparency to the people who don't donate to you. As I said, user-defined privacy is a key word here.
But don't you think, is it possible that blockchain technology might be in some way the foundation for a perfect surveillance state?
The blockchain in itself is, especially if you can define the real-life identities behind all the addresses. We do, though, have examples of blockchain applications that offer a very high degree of privacy and anonymity. Monero is an example there, and I just can only repeat, Bitcoin has a bright future when we manage to increase the degree of privacy and anonymity and thus fungibility in Bitcoin. Privacy and anonymity in a monetary system has also got to do with the quality of the money. For example, in Bitcoin, if the government would be capable of knowing the identity behind every address, the government could blacklist addresses. They could say it's illegal to receive money from this or that address, They could blacklist addresses, or they could demand you to only accept money from whitelisted addresses, which would be addresses where the government knows the identity behind. And this is not only a problem for privacy and anonymity, this is also a problem for the money itself, because it takes the fungibility away from the money. Fungibility meaning that every unit of a currency needs to be treated exactly the same. Every ounce of gold is an ounce of gold. Every Czech krona is a Czech krona. It doesn't matter who had it before. You don't know if illegal business was done with it before. That's the perfect fungibility. But if you take that away, then some of the units of a currency are worth less than others, because you cannot spend them everywhere. So therefore, increasing privacy and anonymity and fungibility in Bitcoin has not only got to do with individual privacy, it also has got to do with monetary qualities.
Yesterday, you also mentioned about freedom of transactions as a basic human right. Mm-hmm. What did you mean exactly by saying that? What is wrong with freedom of transactions?
I strongly believe that freedom of transaction is a basic human right that has been forgotten to declare. It was never declared because in the past thousands of years we had freedom of transaction, because we had anonymous cash money. You could make a transaction in some back room and exchange whatever goods or services you wanted to. While moving into the digital era, into the information age, everything gets digitized. Everything you want to do to live your other declared basic human rights, like freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, to travel anonymously, all these freedoms now depend on digital processes in which you can be identified, and that's a bad thing, because if you're a dissident in some dictatorship country and they claim you have freedom of speech, or let's say you're a dissident in some dictator country, forget freedom of speech here, if you cannot pay your internet access, your VPN, or your blog online in an anonymous way, then freedom of speech doesn't bring you anything. You cannot live out your freedom of speech. If you cannot pay a train ticket in an anonymous way, you cannot anonymously travel to a meeting, to an assembly. So in the digital age, freedom of transaction is actually an underlying thing on which all the other declared human rights are built on top of. For that reason, I think we should put that human right on the agenda, because we cannot live our other declared human rights without freedom of transaction.
I can totally agree with you, because what we are seeing today is that more and more transactions are going to credit cards or mobile payment systems. Mm-hmm. And when we look at certain countries, for example, Nordic countries or South Korea or even China, and China is really a remarkable case, because just in a few years cash has been completely eliminated and people just move to using WeChat Pay. And what I'm trying to point out, if we remove cash as an option, that means that every single transaction is going to be intermediated by some third party. Mm-hmm. And that could be state, that could be government, that could be payment provider.
It's all of them.
If cash could be eliminated, what kind of consequences might it have for society? What kind of scenarios of the future might we have afterwards?
It's the ultimate surveillance state. It's if every economic interaction you have is being recorded, you have the ultimate surveillance state. Also, you will always be subject to fees. Governments love the idea of a cashless society because it gives them full surveillance potential. Banks love cashless society because they can take a little percentage of every pack of chewing gum you buy. So you have these two entities, the financial system and the governmental system, and they both want this, then you know what's going to happen. And there's other reasons for our existing financial system to want to abolish cash, and that is because in order to keep the system running, we need to move further and further into negative interest rates. We have minus 0.4 now in the European Union. Next year we will have minus 0.8, whatever. And everybody knows that from a certain percentage on, people will just go to the bank and withdraw their money and store it under their mattress instead of losing money in their bank account. But the system to survive needs to take that wealth away from the population. So there you have another reason that tells you why cash is going to be abolished one way or another.
But what is also interesting to me is that Germany seems to be sort of opposite country, because just like, years ago you couldn't pay anything except cash. And what is interesting to me, why is that?
It's got to do with the unique monetary history of Germany. Germany is a prime example for hyperinflation. I mean, it's 100 years ago, but there's a kind of collective memory about that. Like for example, from my grandfather, when I was a kid, I got these funny banknotes with millions and billions and trillions of D-marks, of marks having printed on them. I heard the stories how bad it was when my grandfather lived. My grandfather as a child suffered hunger through this time. But that's only one example. We had 5 or 6 devaluating currency changes in the last 100 years. So I think the German population got burned a lot through their money being manipulated or taken away or inflated into infinity. And they just like their cash. I think that they trust banks less than other people even.
Since we are moving to the cashless society, we need to preserve former cash. According to you, is it possible that Bitcoin might be that cryptocurrency that preserve financial freedom of people?
It could not only be that is the case. Bitcoin is literally our escape from the cashless society, whereas we here have to for your viewers, define cash. Cash is not defined by being paper notes and coins. Cash is defined by certain properties, and those properties are it must be able to transfer it without a middleman. Like I must be able to give it to you. The receiver must be able to validate the transaction. You must be, if you receive the money, you must be capable of on the spot realizing, yes, this is valid, I get paid now. The transaction must not be reversible, except with violence. If I'm in my bar and you pay your beer, I have the money, and you can only reverse it with a baseball bat. The fourth property is that the identities of sender and receiver are not necessary. These are properties of cash as we know it from the past, from the analog world. And with Bitcoin, we managed to transfer these properties into a digital realm, into a digital thing. Therefore, Bitcoin deserves the term digital cash. And it will be the cash that replaces our fiat cash that we use today if it's being taken away from governments.
But protesters in places like Hong Kong bought a one-day subway ticket with cash in order to avoid being tracked. And it seems like revolutions there already happened without Bitcoin.
Yeah, because they still have cash. Because they still have an anonymous means of payment. This is what I tried to say before. No revolution ever fought for freedom of transaction because it always was there, because we always had this physical cash. Not even in the American Revolution, the Independence War, when they wrote their constitution, not even they came up with the idea that they would have to write down and declare freedom of transaction as a basic human right, like freedom of speech. But if you look at history a little closer, you will find out that the American Revolution would not have happened if Franklin and all the other revolutionaries would not have been able to anonymously travel to meet up and make the plan how to kick the king out of the country. America would still be a colony of the English crown today if these people would not have had the possibility to anonymously meet, which made it necessary to anonymously travel. And if they would have had to pay their train ticket or their horse or whatever they used back then, if they would have had to pay the credit card or PayPal, then the English king would have known what they're up to, and that revolution would have never happened. So yes, in Hong Kong they still have cash, so they can use that to pay for subway tickets anonymously. That will, if they do so right now, we may see as a next move of the Hong Kong government to just make it mandatory that you pay your tube fare, your subway fare, with a credit card and not with cash.